Chapter 5. Time for Action. Beyond Sheltered Walls. By early March, Ivan and Nadya's makeshift volunteer center has evolved into an efficient operation. Their database now tracks hundreds of people in need, maps safe routes that change daily, and coordinates with other volunteer groups across Kyiv. What began as impromptu aid deliveries has become a lifeline for many. "We need to expand," Nadya suggests one morning, pointing to the growing list of requests on her screen. "There are areas we can't reach from here." Ivan rubs his eyes, exhausted from another night of server maintenance. It's getting more dangerous. Russian forces are pushing closer to the city. Outside, the sound of anti-aircraft fire punctuates their conversation. The distant thud of artillery has become so constant that they've almost stopped noticing it. Serhiy, a former taxi driver who now uses his intimate knowledge of Kyiv's streets to plan evacuation routes, joins them with a thermos of coffee. "I heard from my brother in Irpin yesterday," he says, his voice low. "It's bad. Civilians trapped, limited food, no electricity. Many want to leave, but can't." Ivan and Nadya exchange glances, understanding passing between them without words. Irpin, just northwest of Kyiv, has become a frontline town, caught in the path of the Russian advance. "We need to help them," Nadya says finally. "Not just with information, but physically getting them out." The decision is made quickly. By noon, they've assembled a small convoy, Ivan's Skoda, Serhiy's taxi, and a minibus borrowed from a local church. Their phones are charged, their emergency medical kits stocked. Each vehicle carries extra fuel, water, and high-calorie food bars. Before leaving, Nadya posts a careful message on her encrypted channel, heading north to assist. Signal when possible. Her international followers have been amplifying her updates, ensuring the world sees what's happening in Ukraine. The road to Irpin feels like passing through different worlds. Central Kyiv, though tense and partially deserted, still maintains a fragile normality. But as they drive northwest, evidence of war grows more pronounced. Checkpoints become more frequent, buildings show damage from shelling, the streets are eerily empty, except for military vehicles and occasional ambulances. At Romanivka Bridge, they're stopped by Ukrainian territorial defense forces. "You can't go further by vehicle," a young soldier tells them, his face aged beyond his years. The bridge ahead is damaged, and there's active shelling. Civilians are crossing on foot. They park their vehicles in the shadow of an abandoned gas station and continue on foot. The sound of artillery grows louder. Ivan feels his heart pounding, but keeps moving forward, focusing on Nadya's back ahead of him, on the emergency backpack weighing down his shoulders. What they find at the crossing is a scene that will haunt them forever. Hundreds of people wait to cross a partially collapsed bridge, clutching whatever possessions they could carry. Elderly people lean on relatives, mothers hold crying children, pets whimper in carriers. The Ukrainian soldiers are helping people across, one by one. "We're volunteers," Nadya explains to the coordinating officer. "We have transportation waiting on the other side." The officer nods gratefully. "Focus on the elderly and families with children," he says. "And be quick, they shell this crossing regularly." For the next 3 hours, they work without stopping. Ivan finds himself carrying children across the damaged section of bridge, passing them back to their parents on the safer side. Nadya helps elderly people negotiate the treacherous crossing, supporting their weight, murmuring encouragement. Serhiy organizes the evacuees into groups for transport once they reach the vehicles. Each person has a story that breaks their hearts. An elderly professor who refused to leave his apartment until his building was hit directly. A young mother with twin infants born just days before the invasion. A man carrying his elderly father on his back, having walked for miles to reach the crossing. "My sister," a woman tells Nadya as they cross, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "She's still in Bucha. They say it's even worse there." A distant explosion shakes the ground, and everyone instinctively crouches. The soldiers urge them to move faster. Ivan helps a boy of about 12 across the bridge, noticing how the child doesn't flinch at the sound of shelling, already accustomed to the noises of war. "Where are your parents?" Ivan asks. "My mother is ahead with my little sister," the boy answers, his voice flat. "My father is fighting. He gave me his watch and told me to keep time for him until he returns." The boy shows Ivan an old mechanical watch, too large for his wrist, carefully wrapped in a handkerchief in his pocket. By late afternoon, they've helped over 60 people cross the river that separates them from the city and transported them to safer areas of Kyiv. Their vehicles make multiple trips, navigating roads increasingly damaged by shelling. During one return journey, they pass a convoy of international journalists headed toward the crossing. Ivan recognizes the CNN logo on one of the armored vehicles. "Good," Nadya declares when he points it out. "The world needs to see." As dusk approaches, the Ukrainian soldiers insist they leave for their own safety. "Night is when it gets worst," a grizzled commander tells them. "You've done enough for today. Go back to Kyiv." Reluctantly, they agree, promising to return the next day with more vehicles, more supplies. The drive back to Kyiv is mostly silent, each of them processing what they've witnessed. The minibus ahead of them carries a family of 5 and an elderly couple. In Ivan's car, a mother sits in the back, her 2 children finally asleep against her shoulders after hours of terror. "Do you have family in Kyiv?" Ivan asks softly, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. "My sister," she answers. "If she's still there, if her building is still there." Night has fallen by the time they return to their shelter. After helping the evacuees connect with relatives or find temporary accommodation, Ivan and Nadya finally collapse in their corner of the basement. Neither speaks for a long time, the weight of the day settling over them. "We need to do more," Nadya finally says, echoing words that have become something of a mantra between them. "Tomorrow, we go back with more vehicles, and we need to start collecting information about Bucha." Ivan nods, feeling both utterly exhausted and strangely energized. In helping others escape the horrors of war, they've found a purpose that sustains them through their own fear and grief. As they update their database with new information about the crossing, about conditions in Irpin, about the needs of evacuees, Nadya suddenly stops typing and looks at Ivan. "That boy today, with his father's watch," she says. "That's what we're fighting for, isn't it? Not just survival, but the promise of return. The belief that someday time will start moving normally again." Ivan thinks of all the stories they've heard, from the Holodomor, from the Orange Revolution, from Maidan, and sees the common thread running through them all. The Ukrainian capacity for hope, for maintaining humanity in inhuman conditions, for believing in a future even in the darkest present. "Yes," he agrees, reaching for her hand across their makeshift workstation. "And we'll keep that promise for him and for all of them." Outside, the air raid sirens begin their nightly wail, but in their small corner of the shelter, Ivan and Nadya continue planning tomorrow's mission, their shared purpose, a light that helps push back the darkness gathering around their beloved city. Road to Bucha. The news reaches them on March 12th. Filtering through fragmented communication channels, Russian forces have withdrawn from areas northwest of Kyiv, including Bucha. The messages on Nadya's secure Telegram channel are cryptic, urgent. "Civilians need immediate assistance. Situation catastrophic. Document everything." The word "document" catches Nadya's attention. As a blogger with international connections, she understands the imperative to bear witness. Over the past weeks, their volunteer efforts have evolved beyond evacuations and aid deliveries. They've become chroniclers, gathering evidence, recording testimonies, ensuring that the world sees the truth. "We need to go," she tells Ivan, already packing her equipment: camera, portable chargers, medical supplies, and the satellite phone donated by a foreign journalist who recognized the value of their work. Ivan has just returned from a 20-hour evacuation mission. Dark circles shadow his eyes, and his hands bear the calluses of someone who has helped carry countless people to safety. Still, he nods without hesitation. "I'll get the van ready." Their team has grown. Serhiy, the former taxi driver, has become their navigation expert. Olena, a combat medic from the 2014 Donbass fighting, handles emergency care. Maxim, a law student, documents potential war crimes. Together, they've developed a grim expertise in operating in the aftermath of occupation. The drive to Bucha is tense with anticipation. Ukrainian military checkpoints grow more frequent as they approach. At the final checkpoint, a soldier with hollow eyes examines their volunteer credentials. "Be prepared," he warns, his voice hoarse. There are no words." They enter Bucha under a cold spring sun that seems to mock the devastation below. The streets they drive through bear witness to intense fighting, buildings reduced to rubble, burned-out tanks, the twisted remains of everyday life scattered across the pavement. But it's what they find on Yablunska Street that will stay with them forever. Bodies, in the street, in yards, some with hands bound behind their backs, some with clear signs of torture, civilians, in civilian clothes, men, women, the elderly. The air carries the unmistakable scent of death. "Stop the van," Nadya says quietly. Her professional demeanor, cultivated through weeks of crisis work, threatens to crack. But she steadies herself, reaches for her camera with hands that only slightly tremble. "We document first," she says, "then we help the living." For 3 hours, they move methodically through the neighborhood. Maxim records GPS locations, takes notes. Nadya photographs everything, her camera capturing what words cannot express. Elena examines bodies to determine when and how they died. Ivan and Serhiy search for survivors, calling out into the eerie silence that hangs over the town. They find them in basements, in crawl spaces, in bathtubs where they've hidden for weeks. People emerge slowly, disbelievingly, into the sunlight. An older woman clutches a small icon, kissing it repeatedly. A man carries his disabled son up basement stairs, both of them gaunt from weeks of limited food. Children whose eyes hold the vacant stare of those who have seen what no child should ever witness. "They killed my husband for his boots," a woman tells Nadya, her voice eerily calm. "Made me watch. Said they'd come back for me. But they left suddenly. I've been hiding in the pantry since." Ivan helps an elderly man who hasn't had medication for his heart condition in weeks. As he supports him toward the van, the man suddenly stops. "My neighbor," he says, pointing to a house across the street. "Marina. She has 2 small children. They were hiding in the root cellar." They find Marina and her children alive but traumatized. The 5-year-old boy hasn't spoken since watching Russian soldiers loot their home. The 7-year-old girl clutches a dirty teddy bear missing one eye, whispering to it in a language that seems to consist solely of reassurances. By late afternoon, they've filled the van with survivors needing evacuation, documented dozens of potential war crimes, and gathered testimonies that will later be shared with international investigators. As Ivan turns the van around to head back to Kyiv, Nadya stares silently out the window, her camera heavy in her lap. At a military checkpoint outside Bucha, they transfer the most vulnerable evacuees to an ambulance. A journalist team from an international news agency pulls up, preparing to enter the town. Ivan recognizes a reporter he's seen on BBC. "Wait," Nadya calls, approaching them. She hands the reporter her memory card. "Make sure the world sees. All of it. Unfiltered." The drive back to Kyiv passes in weighted silence. In the back of the van, Marina's children have finally fallen asleep, their small bodies curled against each other. Maxim reviews his notes, occasionally wiping tears from his face with clinical detachment. Elena stares out the window, her expression unreadable. It's only later, in the privacy of their corner of the shelter, that Ivan sees Nadya's composure finally break. Her shoulders shake with silent sobs as she curls into herself, her professional mask dissolving under the weight of what they've witnessed. Without words, Ivan pulls her into his arms. They stay that way for what feels like hours, holding each other, bearing witness to each other's grief and horror. Their shared experience has forged a connection that transcends ordinary understanding, something deeper than friendship, more profound than romance. "How?" Nadya finally whispers against his shoulder. "How do humans do this to other humans?" Ivan has no answer. Instead, he remembers the stories they've heard, of the Holodomor, of Soviet oppression, of centuries of attempted erasure. "But they never succeed," he says softly. "They try to break us, generation after generation, but we endure. We remember. We bear witness." Nadya pulls back slightly, her eyes red but dry now. "Tomorrow we go back," she says. "It's not a question." Ivan nods. "Tomorrow we go back." That night, as air raid sirens wail outside, they sit together updating their database, editing photos, preparing evidence packages for human rights organizations. Their hands occasionally brush as they work, each touch a reminder, you are not alone in this darkness. In the corner, Marina's children sleep fitfully on improvised beds. The little boy whimpers in his sleep, and Nadya moves instinctively to comfort him, stroking his hair until he settles. Ivan watches her, feeling something shift in his chest. Not just affection or attraction, but a recognition of shared purpose, of values aligned at the most fundamental level. As dawn approaches, bringing with it another day of bearing witness to both atrocity and resilience, Ivan realizes that amid the horror and devastation, something unexpected has emerged. A love forged in crisis, tempered by shared trauma, and defined by mutual courage. Not the romantic love of peacetime, with its gentle courtships and carefree moments, but something equally powerful. The love of two people who have seen the worst of humanity together and still choose to believe in the possibility of better days ahead. When Nadya returns to their workspace, her face bearing the exhaustion of sleepless nights and witnessed horrors, Ivan hands her a cup of precious real coffee, their fingers lingering in the exchange. "For the children," he says simply. She nods, understanding the layers in his words. They do this work for Marina's children, for the boy with his father's watch, for all those who deserve a future free from the terrors they've documented today. "For the children," she echoes, "for Ukraine." Outside, the first light of day breaks over Kyiv. Another day of bearing witness begins. Behind enemy lines. The call comes at 3:17 a.m. on a rainy April night. Ivan jolts awake, fumbling for his phone in the darkness. "They have my sister," a woman's voice says without preamble. He recognizes Marina from Bucha, now safely relocated to western Ukraine. Russians took her from Mariupol. She's in a filtration camp near Donetsk. Ivan sits up, instantly alert. Beside him, Nadya stirs, sensing the tension in his posture. "How do you know?" he asks, already reaching for his laptop. "She managed one call, 3 minutes." Marina's voice breaks. "They're separating families, taking people to Russia, children." She can't continue. "We'll find her," Ivan promises, though he has no idea how. "Send her last known location." After the call ends, he turns to find Nadya already dressed, her go-bag at her feet. "How bad?" she asks. "Filtration camp, Donetsk region." The words hang between them, heavy with implication. They've heard the reports, Ukrainian civilians forced through filtration before deportation to Russia. Those with military connections, government ties, or Ukrainian patriotic symbols on their phones separated, sometimes never seen again. "We can't go there, Ivan." Nadya's voice is gentle but firm. "It's behind Russian lines. I know someone who can help." Ivan is already scrolling through encrypted contacts. "Remember Taras? From the IT Volunteer Corps?" Nadya nods slowly. Taras had helped them set up secure communications for their evacuation operations. Before the invasion, he'd worked in Ukraine's cybersecurity department. "He has connections with people who operate in gray areas," Ivan continues carefully. "People who can move across lines." The plan comes together over the next 12 hours, a high-risk rescue mission requiring resources, intelligence, and incredible luck. Taras connects them with a network of volunteers specializing in extracting people from occupied territories. Ivan and Nadya can't go to Donetsk, but they can help coordinate from the Ukrainian side, positioning themselves at the last checkpoint before occupied territory. "You understand the risks?" Sergei asks as they prepare to leave Kyiv. "If you're caught with communications equipment near the front," Ivan nods grimly. Stories abound of civilians executed as suspected spotters for Ukrainian artillery. Their journey east is a tense 30-hour odyssey through checkpoints, along bombed-out roads, and past the scars of recent battles. They travel in a nondescript van with medical supplies as cover, a legitimate humanitarian mission that masks their secondary purpose. Near Zaporizhzhia, the Ukrainian military checkpoint commander eyes their credentials suspiciously. "You're going where?" he asks, studying their paperwork. "Forward medical station," Nadya explains, using the agreed-upon cover. "Supply delivery and civilian evacuation." The commander's radio crackles to life. Reports of shelling nearby, casualties incoming. His attention diverts. "Your responsibility if you get killed," he mutters, waving them through. They establish their base in an abandoned gas station just 5 kilometers from the front line. The sound of artillery exchanges forms a constant backdrop as they set up their equipment. Olena arrives with medical supplies, maintaining their cover while creating a genuine aid station. Maxim brings documents, fake Russian permits, movement authorizations, crafted by specialists in Lviv. At nightfall, the real operation begins. A team of 3 extraction specialists, former Special Forces soldiers now working underground, arrive in a battered Russian-made Lada with Donetsk plates. "We have 12 hours," their leader says curtly. His weathered face bears a scar running from temple to jaw, his eyes those of a man who has seen too much. He introduces himself only as Vovk, Wolf. Ivan provides the intelligence they've gathered, the camp's location, security patterns, the name of Marina's sister. Nadya hands over specialized communications equipment that will work in areas where cellular networks have been disabled. "If she's there, we'll find her," Vovk promises. "Be ready at dawn." After the extraction team departs, slipping through the darkness toward enemy territory, the waiting begins. Hours stretch like rubber bands, taut with tension. Every distant explosion makes them flinch. Every approaching vehicle prompts them to reach for weapons they've reluctantly learned to use. Midnight passes, then 1 a.m., 2 a.m. At 3:21 a.m., their secure radio crackles. Package secured. Complication. The transmission cuts out. Ivan and Nadya exchange alarmed glances. Complication could mean anything. Injury, pursuit, discovery. "Prepare medical," Nadya tells Elena, who immediately readies emergency supplies. They wait another excruciating hour before headlights appear on the road, approaching fast, too fast. The battered Lada skids into the gas station, one door hanging askew, bullet holes peppering its trunk. Vovk emerges from the driver's seat, blood streaming from a wound in his shoulder. "Help them," he gasps. In the back seat, a woman clutches a small bundle to her chest, Marina's sister, Katerina, her face gaunt from weeks in captivity. But it's what she holds that explains the complication, an infant no more than 3 months old. "Not hers," Vovk explains as Elena treats his gunshot wound. "Found him alone. Parents took to Russia, most likely. Couldn't leave him." The baby is severely malnourished, skin pale and eyes sunken. Elena works quickly, inserting an IV line into his tiny arm while Nadya helps Katerina from the car. "We need to move," Ivan urges, hearing the distant sound of helicopter rotors. "Now!" They transfer Katerina and the baby to their van, helping the injured Vovk into the passenger seat. His 2 companions are missing. "Didn't make it," he says simply, his face a mask of controlled grief. Rearguard. As they pull away, the sound of artillery grows louder. The Russians have detected the breach. Their escape window is closing rapidly. The journey back through no man's land becomes a nightmare of navigation and near misses. Twice they divert to avoid Russian drones overhead. Once they freeze in place as an armored patrol passes just 200 meters away. The baby stirs, threatening to cry. A sound that would betray their position instantly. Katerina, despite her own trauma, soothes him with gentle whispers, her maternal instincts overriding her exhaustion. Dawn breaks as they approach the Ukrainian checkpoint. Safety seems tantalizingly close when a Russian drone appears overhead, hovering directly above their van. "They've spotted us," Vovk says grimly, reaching for his weapon despite his injury. Ivan makes a split-second decision, veering off the main road onto a narrow farm track. "Alternative route," he explains, following a path Serhiy had marked on their maps as a contingency. The drone follows. Behind them, the sound of vehicles in pursuit grows louder. "There," Nadya points to an abandoned barn ahead. "Cover." They barely make it inside before the first shots ping against the van's exterior. Ivan kills the engine as everyone scrambles for the relative safety of the barn's stone walls. Katerina clutches the infant, her body curled protectively around him. "Ukrainian checkpoint is 2 kilometers northwest," Ivan whispers, studying their GPS. "Through that field." "They'll see us in the open," Vovk argues. "Not if they're distracted," Nadya says, a plan forming. She pulls out a remote detonator, part of their emergency equipment. "The van, if we rig it." Understanding dawns on Ivan's face. Their van contains enough fuel and medical oxygen tanks to create a significant diversion. Working quickly, they prepare the vehicle while Elena stabilizes Vovk's wound. Within minutes, they're ready. Nadya will trigger the explosion remotely once they're safely away, drawing their pursuers to the barn while they escape across the fields. "Go," Ivan urges, helping Katerina to her feet. "Run." They slip out the barn's back entrance as the sound of Russian voices grows closer. The muddy field before them offers no cover, just open ground between life and death. "Stay low," Move fast, Vov constructs, grimacing through his pain. They make it 50 meters before shots ring out. They've been spotted. Nadya immediately triggers the detonator. The explosion behind them is massive, momentarily distracting their pursuers, but not for long. Run, Ivan shouts, half carrying Katerina, while Nadya takes the baby. The Ukrainian checkpoint seems impossibly distant as bullets kick up dirt around them. Olena helps the wounded Vovk, who moves with remarkable speed despite his injury. Ivan feels something hot graze his arm, a bullet passing close enough to tear his jacket and draw blood. He stumbles but keeps moving, propelled by adrenaline and the fierce determination to survive. The baby wails in Nadia's arms, his cries carrying across the battlefield. She covers his tiny body with her own as best she can while still running. Just when it seems they can't possibly make it, Ukrainian soldiers appear over the rise, providing covering fire. The distinctive crack of Ukrainian rifles answers the Russian fire as the soldiers advance to secure their escape. The final 100 meters pass in a blur of motion and sound. Then suddenly, incredibly, they're behind Ukrainian lines, collapsing into the mud as medics rush forward. In the chaotic aftermath, as they're loaded into military ambulances, Ivan reaches for Nadia's hand. Her fingers interlace with his, both their palms slick with mud and blood. "The baby," she says, her voice hoarse from exertion. "Safe," a medic confirms. They both are. It's only then, in the relative safety of the ambulance speeding toward a military hospital, that the magnitude of what they've done hits them. They've crossed enemy lines, rescued not just one but 2 lives, and made it back, bloodied but alive. Katerina, sedated now on a stretcher opposite them, still reaches unconsciously for the infant being tended by a pediatric medic. Even in her exhausted state, she won't let him go. "What will happen to him?" Ivan asks quietly. "He's Ukrainian," Nadya answers with fierce certainty. "We'll find his family if they're alive. If not." She doesn't finish the thought, but her eyes communicate what words cannot, that this child, like so many others, will become part of the extended family of those who survive this war. As the adrenaline fades, pain replaces it. Ivan's grazed arm, Nadya's bruised ribs from shielding the baby, the deeper invisible wounds of what they've witnessed. But alongside the pain is something else, something that burns brighter with each shared danger, the certainty that what binds them now goes beyond friendship or even love. It is something forged in fire, tested by darkness, and proven in moments when death seemed certain. A bond that, like Ukraine itself, refuses to break under even the most terrible pressure. What remains after fire? The military hospital in Zaporizhzhia operates at capacity, a grim choreography of medical staff moving between wounded soldiers and civilian casualties. Ivan sits on the edge of an examination table as a doctor stitches the bullet graze on his arm. 3 beds over, Nadya winces as a nurse wraps her bruised ribs. Their eyes meet across the crowded ward, a silent conversation passing between them. "We made it. We're alive." The adrenaline has worn off, leaving them hollowed out, trembling with delayed shock. Ivan watches Nadia's hands, steady while carrying a baby through gunfire, now shaking as she buttons her clean shirt. A military intelligence officer waits outside their curtained area, patient but insistent. Their unauthorized mission has consequences: crossing into occupied territory, engaging with unauthorized extraction teams, potentially compromising military operations. The list of infractions is substantial. "You could have been killed," the officer, Major Kovalenko, says when they're finally seated in a small conference room. His tone is professionally neutral, but his eyes hold something like reluctant admiration. Or worse, captured and used for propaganda. "We couldn't do nothing," Nadya argues, her voice hoarse from dust and exertion. "They're deporting people daily, children separated from parents." The major raises a hand, cutting her off. "I understand why. I'm questioning how. Your operation was reckless, uncoordinated with military intelligence," and he pauses, "successful where our own attempts have failed." This admission hangs in the air between them. "What happens now?" Ivan asks, acutely aware of Nadya beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "Officially, you're being reprimanded and restricted to Kyiv humanitarian operations," the major responds, sliding papers across the table for them to sign. "Unofficially," he leans forward, "we need to talk about your network." 3 hours later, they emerge with a new status. Their volunteer operation, now semi-officially coordinated with military intelligence. Their knowledge of occupied territories, their contacts, their documentation of war crimes, all valuable to the Ukrainian Defense Forces. We just became assets, Nadya murmurs as they walk toward the recovery ward where Katerina and the baby are being treated. Ivan takes her hand, feeling the scrapes on her palm against his own. We've been assets since the first day. Now we just have some protection. The pediatric ward is quieter than the rest of the hospital, though still crowded with children injured in the fighting, or, like the infant they rescued, suffering from malnutrition and neglect. They find Katerina sitting beside the baby's small incubator, her own IV still attached to her arm. They say he's improving, she tells them, her eyes never leaving the tiny form. They found formula that agrees with him. Have you thought about a name? Nadya asks gently, standing close enough that her arm presses against Ivan's. Katerina looks up, her face marked by weeks of captivity, but her eyes clear with purpose. Miroslav. She says, it means peace and glory, because he deserves both. Something shifts in the atmosphere between Ivan and Nadya, a recognition of life continuing, of purpose beyond mere survival. Without discussing it, they've become responsible for not just evacuating and documenting, but for something more fundamental, ensuring a future for children like Miroslav. They spend the night in the hospital, refusing transfer to military barracks. Instead, they curl together on a narrow cot in a storage room, too exhausted for conversation, but unable to bear separation. Ivan's arm wraps around Nadya, protective even in sleep, her head tucked against his chest where she can hear his heartbeat, proof of survival, of continuation. Dawn brings a rush of new casualties, the hospital jolted awake by incoming artillery victims. In this environment of pain and urgency, their own injuries seem minor by comparison. Yet the doctor insists they rest one more day before traveling. You've been running on adrenaline for weeks, she tells them bluntly. Eventually, the human body revolts. They use the enforced rest to plan their return to Kyiv, to check on their volunteer network, to download the precious documentation from their secure drives. In the afternoon, a military chaplain visits Katerina, offering to baptize Miroslav. The impromptu ceremony takes place in a small hospital chapel. Ivan and Nadya standing as godparents, a commitment neither takes lightly. As the chaplain recites ancient words of protection over the tiny infant, Nadya's hand finds Ivan's, their fingers intertwining. He looks down at her, seeing tears tracking silently down her cheeks. We're responsible for him now, she whispers, for his future. For all of them, Ivan agrees, thinking of the children they've evacuated, documented, saved. Later, as sunset paints the hospital windows amber, they walk slowly through a small courtyard, their first moment of relative peace in days. The distant thunder of artillery continues, a constant reminder of the war that has transformed their lives. I can't remember what normal feels like anymore, Nadya admits, leaning against a concrete planter containing stubborn spring flowers. My apartment, my blog, my travel plans, it all seems like someone else's life. Ivan stands before her, suddenly acutely aware of how her presence has become essential to his ability to function in this new reality. Without her determination, her courage, her moral clarity, he would have been lost weeks ago. There's no going back to before, he says quietly, but forward. I can't imagine forward without you beside me. The words emerge unplanned, surprising them both with their directness. They've moved beyond the need for careful courtship, beyond traditional relationships with their measured pace. War has burned away pretense, leaving only what is essential, undeniable. Nadya looks up at him, fatigue and emotion making her unusually vulnerable. I keep thinking, she says slowly, about all those stories we heard, the Holodomor survivors, the resistance fighters, the protesters at Maidan. How did they rebuild afterward? How did they find normal again? They had something to believe in, Ivan answers, someone to hold on to. He reaches up, tentatively touching her cheek, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leans into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. I'm scared, she admits, words she would never speak in front of their team, their evacuees. Not of dying, of surviving and finding nothing left of the world we knew. Ivan moves closer, his forehead resting against hers. We'll build something new, he promises, something better. When their lips finally meet, it feels less like a first kiss and more like coming home after a long, dangerous journey. Their arms wrap around each other, holding on as if against a storm, finding in each other's embrace the anchor they've both been searching for. The moment is interrupted by air raid sirens, the hospital staff calling for everyone to move to the shelter. Reality reasserts itself. They are still in a war zone, still in danger, still far from any resolution. Yet as they hurry back inside, hands still linked, something has solidified between them. Not just attraction or affection, but a covenant forged in fire. Whatever comes, they will face it together. Whatever future emerges from the ashes of war, they will build it side by side. That night, as they share the narrow cot again, their embrace is different, purposeful, a conscious choice rather than mere comfort. Words are unnecessary as hands trace reassurances on skin, lips press promises against temples, heartbeats synchronize into a shared rhythm. When this is over, Ivan whispers into the darkness, if Ukraine is free. Nadya silences him with a gentle finger against his lips. Not if, she corrects. When? In the morning, they will return to Kyiv, to their volunteer work, to the dangerous business of documentation and evacuation. They will carry with them new scars, new responsibilities, and new intelligence contacts. But they will also carry this night, this connection, this promise of something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. As they drift towards sleep, Ivan thinks of all the Ukrainian love songs he used to play with his band, how hollow their lyrics had sometimes seemed. Now he understands what generations of his ancestors knew, that love forged during hardship has depths impossible to fathom in easier times. That finding someone who stands beside you when the world burns is a miracle worth any price. Nadya shifts in his arms, murmuring something in half-sleep. He catches only fragments, something about the baby, about Kyiv, about tomorrow's journey. Even exhausted, her mind works, plans, prepares. He tightens his arms around her, a silent promise to protect what they've found, to nurture it through whatever darkness still lies ahead. Outside, the artillery continues its deadly conversation across the front lines. But here, in this moment, two people have found something the war cannot destroy, a connection that transcends Ukraine's long history of suffering, reaching instead toward its equally long tradition of passionate resilience and hope.